Daniel, what are you doing?
Nothing. Go back to sleep.
You are standing at the foot of the bed staring at me in the dark. That is not nothing. Come back to bed.
I said, go back to sleep, Rebecca.
How long have you been standing there?
Go inside, madam. Go inside and lock the door. What is happening in this house? Who is he? What is wrong with him?
The last 3 brides never made it out. I have nothing more to say.
Rebecca had told herself it was a business arrangement. That was the word she used when she explained it to her mother over the phone. Arrangement. Not desperation, not surrender, not the slow crushing weight of a family drowning in debt with nowhere left to turn. She said arrangement because it sounded clean, controlled, like something a woman with options would choose rather than something a woman with none had been driven to. She was 26 years old. She had a degree she could not eat, a family home in Enugu with a roof that leaked every rainy season, a mother whose hospital bills had swallowed every savings account they had ever built, and a younger brother whose university fees were 3 semesters overdue. She had been beautiful her entire life and had never once thought to use it until the day her uncle called and said he had someone he wanted her to meet. Chief Daniel Okonkwo, 71 years old, retired businessman, net worth that made journalists run out of adjectives, a mansion in Maitama that appeared in 3 architecture magazines, a foundation that built schools in 6 states, a face that appeared on the covers of Forbes Africa, This Day Style, and Vanguard. Always the same expression, calm, dignified, in complete control. A widower 3 times over. Each wife died young. Each death was quiet. Each funeral was private. Rebecca had noticed the dead wives. Of course she had. She was not foolish. But her uncle had waved her concern away like smoke. Women die, he said. It is life. The man is old. Old men outlive young wives sometimes. It happens. She had told herself he was right. She had also told herself that 1 year, maybe 2, would be enough. Enough to clear her mother's debts, enough to fix the roof, enough to pay her brother's fees and set aside something for herself. Then she would find a quiet way out, a respectful separation. She would be careful. She would be smart. She would never be so desperate again. That was the plan. She had made it, sitting in a coffee shop in Abuja, while Chief Daniel sat across from her, slow-moving, soft-voiced, smelling faintly of sandalwood, and told her she reminded him of sunlight. She had smiled at him the way she had practiced in her bathroom mirror, warm but not eager, open but not desperate. She had thought, I can do this. He is old and gentle and I can do this. The wedding was in Lagos, Echo Hotel. 400 guests, a dress that cost more than her father had earned in 3 years of farming, flowers flown in from Amsterdam, a cake with 7 tiers, photographers who moved through the crowd like professionals at a state function, because that is exactly what it was. Chief Daniel had smiled through all of it, slow and steady, and perfectly composed. Shaking hands, receiving congratulations, guiding her gently by the small of her back from one group of well-wishers to the next. He was attentive, courteous. He did not drink. He did not raise his voice. He introduced her to senators and governors and CEOs, and each time he said, "my wife," with a quiet pride that almost made her feel real affection for him. Almost. They flew to Maitama that same evening. The house hit her like a physical thing when she walked through the front doors. It was not just large, it was consuming. Ceilings that disappeared into shadow. Corridors that stretched further than any house had a right to stretch. Staff who appeared and disappeared so quietly they seemed to materialize from the walls themselves. Every surface gleamed. Every room smelled of money so old that it had become its own kind of air. Chief Daniel showed her the master bedroom and left her to settle in while he attended to something downstairs. She stood in the center of the room and turned slowly. 4-poster bed draped in ivory silk, a dressing table with a mirror framed in dark wood, curtains that moved slightly, though the windows were closed, a door on the far left wall that she assumed was a wardrobe, another door she had not noticed at first, narrower, set slightly back into the wall, that was locked. She tried the handle once, locked solid. She did not try again. She changed into her nightgown and got into the enormous bed and told herself she was tired. She told herself the locked door meant nothing. All houses had locked rooms. It was nothing. Chief Daniel came to bed at 11. He kissed her forehead with dry lips, said good night in that same soft, steady voice, and was asleep within minutes. She could hear him breathing, slow and even, and utterly peaceful, while she lay on her back staring at the ceiling and waiting for sleep that would not come. She was still awake at 2 a.m. when she felt it. Not heard, not saw, felt. The particular quality of being watched that lives in the skin before it reaches the eyes. She turned her head slowly toward the foot of the bed. Chief Daniel was standing there. She did not scream. The scream caught somewhere between her chest and her throat and turned into nothing. He was standing completely still at the foot of the bed, both hands at his sides, eyes open, staring directly at her face. Not blinking, not swaying, not breathing, just standing with a stillness that did not belong to any living thing she had ever seen. She spoke to him. He answered in that same flat voice, "Go back to sleep," without moving a single muscle, without blinking once, without drawing a single visible breath. She reached for the lamp. He was in the bed, asleep, snoring softly. She sat without moving for 4 minutes because her body had forgotten how. Then she got up. Then she found Mama Chioma in the corridor, the small wiry housekeeper who she had assumed was simply hardworking, standing outside the door in the dark at 2 a.m. as though she had been planted there, as though she had been waiting for exactly this moment. The last 3 brides never made it out. Rebecca stood in that corridor for a long time after Mama Chioma disappeared. Then she walked back into the bedroom. She did not get back into the bed. She sat in the armchair in the corner, the one facing the foot of the bed, and she watched Chief Daniel sleep. She watched him for 3 hours. He did not move again. He did not stand again. He slept with the peaceful innocence of a grandfather. But she did not sleep. Not 1 second. In the morning, he was cheerful. He ordered breakfast, fresh fruit, eggs, toast, juice, and sat across from her at the dining table with the gentle, unhurried warmth of a man entirely at ease with the world. He asked if she had slept well. She said yes. He smiled and told her she was beautiful and poured her juice with the steady, careful hand of a man who had never once in his life been in a hurry. She watched his hands. Last night, those hands had been at his sides, perfectly still. She watched his eyes. Last night, those eyes had been open and fixed and empty of anything human. This morning, they were warm and crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and full of the particular fond patience of a much older man delighted by a young wife. She excused herself after breakfast and found Mama Chioma in the kitchen. She closed the door. She said, "Tell me everything." Mama Chioma did not pretend she did not understand. She set down the dish. She looked at the door. She looked at Rebecca. And then, in a voice so low it was barely more than breath, she said, "There is a room downstairs, past the second corridor, the one that looks like it ends. It does not end." Rebecca said, "The locked room upstairs?" Mama Chioma shook her head. She said, "That one is nothing, a study. The room I am telling you about is below. You will know it because the air changes before you reach it. You will feel it before you see it. Do not go there alone. Do not go there at night. And whatever you find inside, do not touch anything with your bare hands." Rebecca said, "Why are you telling me this?" Mama Chioma looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Because you are the first one who got up." Rebecca felt the back of her neck go cold. She said, "What do you mean?" Mama Chioma said, "The others, when he stood at the foot of the bed and stared at them, they pulled the covers over their heads and went back to sleep. You got up. You came into the corridor. That means something. I do not know exactly what, but it means something." She picked up her dish and walked to the sink and said nothing more. Rebecca spent that day learning the house. She did it carefully, moving like a woman exploring her new home with natural curiosity, smiling at staff, asking questions about rooms and history and architecture with the light, interested tone of a new bride. But underneath every question, she was mapping. Every corridor, every door, every staircase, every space that felt wrong. The house was vast, but not random. It had been designed with intention. The grand rooms, the reception, the dining room, the sitting rooms were open and warm and beautiful. But the deeper you moved into the structure, the heavier the air became. She noticed it first as a slight pressure in her ears, then as something that sat at the back of her throat, then as a particular quality of silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something that had swallowed sound and kept it. She found the second corridor exactly where Mama Chioma had said. It ran off the main ground floor hallway behind a door that looked like a wall panel. She would never have noticed it if she had not been looking. She pressed her palm to it, and it swung inward on a hidden hinge, smooth and silent and perfectly balanced, the way things move when they have been opened 10,000 times. She stood in the opening and looked down the corridor. Stud floor, low ceiling, no windows, a single strip of electric light running along the top of one wall, just enough to see by, casting everything in pale yellow. The air changed immediately. Mama Chioma had been exactly right. It dropped in temperature, it thickened, it carried something, not a smell exactly, more like the memory of a smell, old, mineral, something that lived far below the surface of ordinary things. She did not go in, not yet. She stood there for 30 seconds and memorized everything she could see from the opening. Then she stepped back and let the panel close. That night, Chief Daniel was attentive and warm and completely ordinary. He told her stories about his early business days in Port Harcourt, funny stories, self-deprecating, charming. He laughed at his own jokes in that quiet, unhurried way. He held her hand across the dinner table. He called her his sunshine for the second time. She laughed with him. She squeezed his hand back. She told herself she was gathering time. Every hour she stayed calm and gave him no reason for suspicion was an hour she could use. When he fell asleep that night, she did not close her eyes at all. She waited until his breathing reached its deepest and most regular rhythm. Then she got up. She dressed in dark clothes. She took the small torch she had quietly retrieved from the kitchen during the day, and she went downstairs. The panel opened exactly as before. She went in this time. The corridor was longer than it had appeared. It turned once, a slow curve to the left, and then ended at a door. Heavy wood, iron handle, not locked. She pushed it open. The room was large, larger than it had any right to be given where it sat in the structure of the house. Stone walls, stone floor, a ceiling she could not quite see. In the center of the room was a table, not a desk, not a dining table, something between the two, covered in a dark cloth. On the walls, fixed at intervals with iron brackets, were photographs. She moved to the photographs first. Women, all of them young, all of them beautiful, all of them African. She counted 14 before she stopped counting. Below each photograph, written directly on the wall in a hand that had not changed across what appeared to be decades, a name and a date. The date went back 40 years. Some photographs were black and white. The most recent 3 were in color, vivid and clear, taken within the last decade. She recognized one face immediately. It was on the 3rd photograph from the right on the bottom row. A woman in her late 20s, high cheekbones, wide eyes, a smile that was trying to be brave and not quite managing it. Rebecca had seen that face before, in the newspapers, in a brief report from 4 years ago about the sudden illness and death of Chief Daniel Okonkwo's 3rd wife. Her name was written on the wall beneath her photograph, Adaize, dated 4 years ago. Beneath the name, in smaller writing, 2 words that turned Rebecca's blood to ice water. Not enough. She stepped back from the wall. She looked at the table. She looked at the cloth over it. She did not touch it. She had promised Mama Chioma. But she circled the table slowly. And at one corner, the cloth had slipped, just slightly, and she could see what was beneath it. She turned away immediately and walked out of the room and back down the corridor and back through the panel and upstairs and into the bathroom, where she turned on the tap and sat on the floor and breathed. She sat there for a very long time. She knew 3 things now. The first, Chief Daniel Okonkwo was not simply an old man who had been unfortunate with wives. The deaths were deliberate and they were purposeful, and the room below the house was where the purpose lived. The second, she did not have the luxury of a slow and careful plan. The photographs told her the timeline. The 2 words beneath Adaize's name told her she had not lasted enough time. Rebecca needed to understand what enough meant before she ran out of time to find out. The third, she could not do this alone. Mama Chioma knew things, but Mama Chioma was trapped in this house by whatever hold Chief Daniel had over her. Rebecca needed someone on the outside, someone who had been inside before and survived. She needed the woman who had made it out. It took her 4 days to find her. 4 days of performing the perfect new wife, warm, content, delighted with her new life, while underneath she worked with the quiet, focused precision of someone whose survival depended on every detail going unnoticed. She used Chief Daniel's own resources to do it. The laptop he had given her freely, the phone line she was told was completely private. Small moments of solitude she extended carefully without drawing attention. The woman's name was Ngozi. She had been wife number 2, 22 years ago. She lasted 11 months and then disappeared so completely and so suddenly that the official story that she had returned to her family overseas had been swallowed without question because nobody had been looking closely enough to question it. Rebecca found her through the oldest photograph in the room, the one dated 23 years ago, and a name written beneath it in that same unchanged hand. She found a trail so faint it was almost nothing. A mention in a community newsletter from 12 years ago. A name attached to a small textile business in Calabar. A phone number that was 3 years out of date, but connected through 2 careful steps to a current one. She called from a public phone in a market 3 kilometers from the house, the one time she had been allowed out, accompanied only by a driver she had slowly and methodically won over with consistent kindness. She spoke for 4 minutes. She said enough in those 4 minutes to make the woman on the other end go completely silent. Then Ngozi said, "I knew this day would come." She said, "Tell me where you are. I am coming." Ngozi arrived in Maitama 6 days after that first call. She came quietly, no announcement, no drama, and she and Rebecca met in the back of a fabric shop 2 streets from the market, while Chief Daniel Okonkwo attended a foundation board meeting across the city. Ngozi was in her mid-50s now. She was calm in the way that people become calm after surviving something that should have destroyed them. Not peaceful exactly, more like someone who has burned through every available panic and come out the other side into a permanent, clear-eyed readiness. She told Rebecca everything. Chief Daniel Okonkwo had not aged in 40 years because Chief Daniel Okonkwo had made an arrangement 4 decades ago that required regular renewal. The room beneath the house was where the renewal happened. Each wife was chosen with specific precision, not for beauty alone, but for a particular quality that Ngozi described as source energy, something she could not fully name but said she had felt the first time he looked at her, a pulling sensation, as though something inside her was being gently and steadily drained. The standing at the foot of the bed, the stillness, the staring, was the beginning of the process, not the completion. The completion required the room. That was why the room existed. That was what the table was for. Rebecca said the 2 words under Adaize's photograph, "not enough." What did that mean? Ngozi was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It meant she ran out before he finished. He did not get what he needed. That is why he married again so quickly after her. He was still running low." Rebecca said, "And you? How did you survive?" Ngozi said, "Because Mama Chioma helped me, the same way she helped you. She has been in that house for 30 years. She cannot leave. He has something of hers that keeps her bound to the property. But she has saved 2 of us from inside, you and me." Rebecca said, "2? You said the last 3 brides never made it out." Ngozi said, "The 3rd one before you, her name was Blessing. She did not get up from the bed. She did not make it to the corridor. I do not know what happened to Blessing, and I have lived with that not knowing every single day for 4 years." The fabric shop was warm and bright and smelt of fresh cotton, and somewhere outside children were laughing in the street, and Rebecca sat in all of that ordinary life and felt the full weight of what she had walked into. Then she said, "So how do we end it?" Ngozi opened the bag she had brought with her and set it on the table between them. She said, "I spent 22 years preparing for this conversation." They went back on a Tuesday. Chief Daniel was home. That was intentional. Everything that needed to happen required him to be present, required him to witness what was being undone, because 40 years of what he had built and sustained and renewed could not simply be walked away from. It had to be faced, and it had to be broken in the place where it lived. Rebecca walked through the front door of her husband's house at 10 in the morning, with Ngozi beside her. She did not announce herself. She did not give the staff time to react. She walked directly to the main sitting room where Chief Daniel was reading, and she stood in the doorway, and she looked at him. He looked up slowly. His eyes moved from her face to Ngozi's face. And for the first time in the 11 days she had known him, she watched something move through Chief Daniel Okonkwo that was not calm and was not controlled and was not performed. It was fear. Ngozi said, "Hello, Daniel. It has been 22 years." What happened in the following 2 hours, Rebecca would spend years trying to find adequate words for. It was not violent. It was not loud. It was methodical and precise, and it moved through the house and through the room below the house with the focused intention of 2 women who had prepared for this moment from entirely different distances. Mama Chioma stood in the kitchen doorway and watched, and did not move and did not speak. But when it was done, when the thing in the room below was broken, and the 40 years of careful maintenance collapsed under the weight of its own undoing, Rebecca saw Mama Chioma's shoulders drop for the first time. Saw the particular release of someone who has been holding something enormous for so long that the holding had become invisible even to them. Chief Daniel sat in his sitting room chair and aged, not metaphorically, not emotionally. He aged the way a building ages when the thing holding it up is removed, steadily, visibly, without drama. The smoothness left his skin, the steadiness left his hands, the particular agelessness that had always sat slightly wrong on him, slightly too perfect, slightly too preserved, dissolved. And what was underneath was what had always been underneath. A very old man. An exhausted, frightened, very old man who had spent 40 years refusing to become what time intended and had finally run out of borrowed years. He did not speak. He looked at his hands. He looked at Ngozi. He looked at Rebecca. And in his eyes, beneath the fear and beneath the collapse, there was something else. Something that might, in another life, have been relief. Rebecca walked out of that house on a Tuesday morning in November with nothing she had brought into it and everything she had preserved by leaving. Her life, her source, as Ngozi had called it, her particular quality of energy that Chief Daniel had chosen her for and had not managed to take. She drove to Enugu that same day. She sat in her mother's kitchen, the one with the leaking roof, and she drank tea, and she said nothing about where she had been or what she had survived, because some things do not have words yet, and this was one of them. Her mother looked at her for a long time across the kitchen table. Then she reached out and put her hand over Rebecca's hand and said, "You are different." Rebecca said, "I know." Her mother said, "But you are here." Rebecca said, "Yes, I am here." The legal process that followed was quiet and thorough. The photographs on the wall of the room below the house were enough. The names, the dates, the 2 words written beneath Adaize's photograph. The women who could be traced were traced. The families who had accepted official explanations and buried their grief and moved on were contacted with care and honesty. Chief Daniel Okonkwo died 11 weeks after that Tuesday morning. The official cause was listed as organ failure consistent with advanced age, which was, in its own way, entirely accurate. His foundation, the schools, the scholarships, the gleaming public legacy of a man who had spent 40 years performing generosity was investigated and restructured under new oversight. Several board members who knew and said nothing found that silence had a cost they had not budgeted for. Mama Chioma left the house on the same day Chief Daniel died. She walked out the front gate at 7 a.m. with a single bag and did not look back. Rebecca was waiting for her at the end of the road with a car and a set of keys to a small apartment in Calabar that she had arranged 3 weeks earlier. Mama Chioma got in the car and sat quietly for a long time and then said, I never thought I would see this road from this direction. Rebecca said nothing. She just drove. Ngozi returned to her textile business in Calabar. She expanded it the following year. She named a new line of fabric, a deep, rich indigo with gold threading, Adaeze. She did not explain the name to anyone who asked. She did not need to. Rebecca took the money she had legally secured from the marriage, a settlement that Chief Daniel's lawyers had drawn up in the first week and that he had signed without argument, perhaps already knowing how things would end, and she used it exactly as she had originally planned. She cleared her mother's hospital debts. She fixed the roof. She paid her brother's fees for the remaining 2 years of his degree and added a year's living expenses on top. She set aside enough for herself to breathe, not to be rich, not to be powerful, not to be anything other than free. And for Rebecca, after 11 days inside that house, free was the only word that mattered. She was 26 years old. She had gone into that marriage with nothing but desperation and come out with something that desperation could never have given her, the absolute clear knowledge of what she was capable of when the alternative was unthinkable. She had gotten up. When every other woman before her had pulled the covers over her head and gone back to sleep, she had gotten up. She had walked out into the corridor. She had stood in the dark and listened to 7 words that should have broken her, and instead had started something that ended 40 years of deliberate and sustained evil. She had gotten up, and she had never gone back. The roof in her mother's house no longer leaked. On rainy evenings, Rebecca sometimes sat on the veranda and listened to the rain fall clean and straight and uninterrupted onto the new iron sheets, and she thought about Adaeze. She thought about Blessing. She thought about all 14 names on that wall and the families who grieved them and the ones who were still grieving. She thought about Mama Chioma sitting in her apartment in Calabar on a Tuesday morning with a cup of tea and a window and a road outside that led anywhere she chose to go. She thought about Ngozi, calm and clear-eyed and permanent in her fabric shop, and the deep indigo cloth with gold threading that bore a name that deserved to outlast the man who had written it on a stone wall with the casual cruelty of an accountant marking something insufficient. And she thought about what her mother had said across the kitchen table. "You are here." Yes, she thought, watching the rain fall clean and straight. I am here. And that, after everything, was the whole story. She went in with nothing but desperation and came out with everything that matters. But here's the question. If you woke up at 2 a.m. and saw what Rebecca saw at the foot of that bed, would you have gotten up? Or would you have pulled the covers over your head and told yourself it was a dream? Drop your answer below. Be honest. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today, and drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.